Cost of being chosen, sacrifice and reward. The night was ordinary, until the sky tore open with a thunderous roar. A beam of silver light fell upon Eren, a quiet villager who never sought greatness. Before he could speak, a voice whispered inside his chest. "You are chosen. Rise, for destiny calls you." Fear wrapped around him like chains. Why him? He was no warrior, no scholar, just a boy with calloused hands. But the mark burned on his arm, proving the truth. He was chosen whether he wanted it or not. The village elders explained the truth. Only one person in each generation was marked to bear the burden of the eternal balance. But with choice came sacrifice. On the very night of his marking, Eren's childhood friend Leora was taken by the shadow creatures that fed on the Chosen's light. His first test was not of strength, but of heart. Could he carry the pain of losing someone he loved and still walk forward? Tears streamed down his face, but deep inside, a flame of vengeance ignited. The sanctuary of the Chosen was nothing like Eren had imagined. It wasn't a temple of gold or marble, nor a palace draped in banners. It was a fortress of stone carved into the heart of a mountain, where the air carried both incense and blood. Shadows seemed to cling to the walls, whispering of all who had entered before and never returned the same. Eren's footsteps echoed as the guardians escorted him through narrow halls. The silence weighed heavier than their armor. At the final gate, a voice rang out, deep and cold. "Here begins the stripping of all that binds you to the mortal world. Only by sacrifice will the Chosen rise." Inside, he found not weapons, but altars, not warriors, but priests with eyes that seemed older than time. The first test was not of steel, but of the heart. A scroll was handed to him, the decree of separation. He was commanded to sever all ties with his family, never to see them, never to speak their names, never to carry their memory into his destiny. Eren's hands trembled as he signed, each stroke of ink feeling like a blade driven into his chest. His mother's words echoed in his mind, soft yet unyielding. "If destiny demands your life, give it, but never forget who you are." When the priests asked him to cast her pendant, the one she gave him as a child, into the fire, his heart nearly broke. The flames devoured it in seconds, but the memory of her voice would not burn away. The second trial was of the body. Hunger gnawed at him for days. His throat burned with thirst. He was forced into sleepless nights, eyes heavy, yet watched constantly by robed figures who whispered chants in languages he could not understand. The third trial was of the flesh. He was thrown into a pit where he fought beasts bred for cruelty, their claws leaving scars across his back and chest. Blood soaked the ground beneath him. Every victory left him weaker, every wound etched deeper into his skin. But strangely, with each scar, he felt something awaken, an energy pulsing through his veins, filling the hollow spaces where his strength had been stripped away. By the end of it, Eren stood before the high priest, battered and broken, his body a map of pain, his spirit on the edge of collapse. Yet his eyes burned with defiance. "You have lost your home, your name, your flesh," the priest intoned. "And yet you endure. What remains?" Eren raised his head, his voice raw but unwavering. "Me. What remains is me." For the first time, the high priest smiled, though it was a smile that promised more suffering yet to come. Time did not pass gently within the sanctuary. It pressed forward like a relentless tide, shaping Eren into something unrecognizable from the boy who had once clutched his mother's pendant. Years had carved him into a man of presence. His body carried the scars of countless battles, but his eyes glowed faintly with the light he had come to command, a light that healed, that steadied hearts, that reminded others of hope even in the darkest of nights. Villagers whispered his name with reverence. Children clung to his cloak as if a shadow alone could protect them. In the field of war, men who were trembling one moment stood firm the next when he was among them. Eren's very presence had become a shield. But with every act of healing, with every victory inspired, he noticed the other truth. Where his light shone brightest, the shadows grew hungrier. The enemy never attacked blindly. They struck at those nearest to him. Companions who marched by his side often fell first, marked as symbols meant to wound Aaron's spirit. He watched brothers in arms bleed out in his hands, whispering final words he could never forget. He saw villages burned simply because he had once rested there, and though his power mended bodies, it could not mend the silence that followed death. One evening, after a battle that left the earth littered with the dead, Aaron sat apart from the others. The campfires flickered weakly against the night wind, carrying with it the stench of blood and smoke. Mirren, one of the few chosen who had endured as long as he had, sat across from him. Her face was streaked with dirt, her dark hair unbound, her eyes weary but sharp. She broke the silence with a voice that trembled between exhaustion and defiance. "Tell me, Aaron, do you still think it's worth it?" The question pierced him deeper than any blade. He stared into the flames, watching them dance like fragments of the light he carried. His lips parted, but no words came. He wanted to say yes, to tell her that every wound, every sacrifice was building toward a destiny greater than themselves, that their suffering had meaning. But the truth pressed heavier on him. Behind his eyes flickered the faces of the fallen, the friends he had healed once but could not save the second time, the children who had cried out for him in burning villages, the men who died believing his presence made them untouchable. The weight of their silent accusations burned hotter than the fire. He clenched his fists, the light under his skin pulsing faintly. Finally, he answered, not in words but in silence. Mirren nodded, as though she had expected nothing else. "That's what I thought," she whispered, and turned her gaze back to the fire. That night, Aaron lay awake, staring at the stars above the battlefield. His chest ached with the paradox of his existence. His power saved lives, but drew death closer to all who stood beside him. He had become both guardian and curse, and the weight of power pressed heavier with every soul lost to his light. For the first time, he began to understand why so few endured the path of the chosen. It wasn't the trials of flesh that destroyed them. It was the slow, unrelenting breaking of the heart. The nights had grown quieter in the sanctuary shadow. Where once laughter and voices filled the barracks of the chosen, there now remained only whispers, muffled conversations in dark corners, and the hollow sound of footsteps echoing through stone halls. Time and trial had stripped them down. Those who had endured were fewer, and those who remained had been shaped into something harder, sharper. Aaron had survived longer than most. He bore scars that told his story, scars that gleamed faintly with the light beneath his skin. His name had spread beyond the mountain halls, whispered in villages and fortresses alike as the beacon of the chosen. People looked to him as if he were untouchable, a figure destined never to fall. But within himself, he knew better. Every day, the burden grew heavier. Every night, the weight pressed deeper. And it was in that heavy silence that the seeds of betrayal began to grow. Mirren's shadow. Mirren had been by his side for years. When others fell, Mirren endured. They had stood shoulder to shoulder in battlefields drenched with blood, had shared the same fire in the biting cold, had buried comrades together when the ground grew too heavy with the dead. To Aaron, Mirren was more than a fellow chosen. He was a brother in spirit, one of the last threads tying him to something human. Where Aaron bore the quiet strength of light, Mirren carried a restless storm. His laughter could cut through despair. His rage could ignite soldiers into fury, and his eyes always seemed to hunger for something more than survival. But hunger, left unchecked, becomes rot. Aaron began to notice the changes slowly. Mirren no longer prayed with the others before battle. His eyes lingered too long on the scars that Aaron carried, as though measuring them against his own. His voice grew sharper when they spoke of destiny, almost mocking the idea that they bled for something greater. And then, there were the nights when Aaron awoke and found Mirren gone from his bedroll, returning at dawn with shadows clinging to him like a second skin. The whispered temptations. The shadows had always sought to corrupt the chosen. They did not strike only with blade and claw. They whispered, patiently, promising relief from the endless weight of duty. Many before had fallen to such temptation, disappearing into the dark, never to return. But none believed Mirren could be swayed. Not until the night he sat across from Aaron, the firelight carving his face into planes of darkness and gold, and asked quietly, "Do you ever wonder if we've been tricked?" Aaron looked up from sharpening his blade. "Tricked? Yes." Mirren's gaze lingered on the flames, his expression unreadable. "We bleed. We starve. We lose everything. And for what? So the priest can keep chanting? So the High Council can remind us that we are chosen while they sit in their halls untouched by war." Aaron frowned. "You know it isn't for them. It's for the people we protect." "The people?" Mirren let out a bitter laugh. "The same people who run when the shadows come, leaving us to hold the line alone. The same people who will one day tell stories of us as if we were monsters instead of martyrs." There was pain in his voice, pain Aaron recognized. But beneath it, there was also bitterness, sharp and festering. Aaron wanted to speak, to remind him of the oath they had sworn, of the meaning behind their suffering. But he hesitated. For the first time, he saw something in Mirren's eyes that unsettled him. Envy. The ambush. The betrayal did not come suddenly. It was woven like a snare, quiet and deliberate. One evening, Mirren approached him with urgency in his voice. "There's movement near the eastern ridge," he said. "A gathering of shadows. The scouts are missing. We need to check it out before they strike." Aaron didn't hesitate. He trusted him. They left under the cover of night, moving swiftly through the forest that lined the sanctuary's base. The air was damp, thick with mist. The moon hung low, its pale light fractured through the branches above. As they climbed the ridge, the silence became unnatural. No crickets, no rustling leaves, no wind, only the sound of their footsteps on the dirt path. It was there at the ridge's crest that Aaron finally sensed it. A presence lurking in the shadows, dozens of them, encircling. The trap snapped shut before he could even draw his blade. Figures stepped out from the darkness, shapes twisted by shadow, eyes glowing like coals, their laughter sharp as knives. Aaron's light flared instinctively, searing against the night, but his heart stopped cold when he looked to Mirren. Mirren was not fighting. He was watching, and in his eyes, Aaron saw no fear, only a cold relief. The fall. The shadows struck with fury. Blades flashed, claws raked across his flesh, and the ground beneath him turned slick with blood. Aaron fought like a man possessed, light exploding from his hands, searing his enemies to ash. Yet no matter how many fell, more surged forward. Through the chaos, he caught glimpses of Mirren, standing at the edge of the battle, untouched, whispering words into the night that seemed to guide the shadow's blades. Betrayal burned hotter than any wound. "Why?" Aaron roared, his voice breaking through the clash of steel. "Why, brother?" Mirren's reply was calm, steady, as if it had been rehearsed 1,000 times. "Because I am done being a prisoner of destiny. I choose freedom." Aaron's blade faltered for the briefest second, and in that moment a shadow's claw tore across his side, sending him crashing to his knees. His light dimmed, blood spilling freely onto the earth. He looked up at Mirren through blurred vision, the world spinning. "Freedom," he whispered. "You think they'll get it to you? They'll devour you." Mirren's lips curved into a bitter smile. "Then better to be devoured on my own terms than die chained to theirs." And with that, he turned his back. The survival. Aaron should have died that night. He should have been buried beneath the weight of shadows, his light extinguished in the dirt of the ridge. But something within him refused to yield. His mother's voice returned, faint but unbroken in his mind. "If destiny demands your life, give it, but never forget who you are." Summoning the last of his strength, Aaron drove his hand into the earth. Light erupted from him like a storm, a blinding wave that seared through the ridge, tearing shadows apart in its fury. The air split with screams, and then silence. When the light faded, Aaron was lying in a field of ash, his body broken, his blood soaking the ground. Mirren was gone. Only the echo of his betrayal remained. The loneliness. Days later, when the priests found him and carried him back to the sanctuary, they spoke of miracles, of how he had survived the impossible. They called him chosen once more, whispered that the gods themselves had shielded him. But Aaron felt no triumph, only emptiness. He had lost comrades before. He had buried brothers and sisters. But this wound was deeper than death. This was betrayal, the tearing of trust, the shattering of the last bond that tied him to another soul as he lay in the dim light of the sanctuary halls. Healing from wounds that would never truly mend, he understood the truth with a clarity that cut deeper than any blade. The greatest sacrifice was not blood, nor pain. The world had grown silent before the storm. Across the lands, villages lay in ruin, forests smoldered from battles fought beneath their canopies, and rivers ran thick with ash. The war of balance, spoken of in prophecies older than memory, had come to its peak. Every soul knew the final clash was approaching. Every heart prayed, though most no longer believed in prayers. And at the center of it all stood Aaron. His body was strong, carved by years of trials, yet his eyes carried the exhaustion of 1,000 lifetimes. The light that once flickered faintly beneath his skin now pulsed like a star contained within him. But its radiance was no comfort to him anymore. For every life it saved, another was lost. For every moment of hope, shadows answered in kind. The sanctuary's bells rang that morning, low and mournful. The high priests gathered in their cold stone hall, their voices trembling with both reverence and fear. "The Shadow Lord has spoken," one announced. "He will end this war. He will scatter his armies, withdraw the darkness, restore balance. But he demands a sacrifice." Aaron stood rigid. "Whose?" The priest's eyes dropped. "Not his enemies, not his allies. He demands her." They stepped aside, and the doors opened, and Aaron's breath caught in his chest. The return. It was Leora, the girl who had once laughed under the stars with him, the friend whose hand he had held on that first night when the trials began, the one he had lost to the shadows before he ever truly understood what it meant to be chosen. But she was not the Leora he remembered. Her hair, once golden, now flowed like strands of night. Her eyes glowed faintly red, shadows twisting at the edges of her form as though the darkness itself clung to her soul. Yet, even through the corruption, Aaron saw her, the curve of her smile, the warmth she once carried, buried beneath the weight of the Shadow Lord's chains. His heart nearly shattered. "Aaron," her voice was soft, broken, carrying both memory and malice. "It's been so long." He took a step forward, but the high priest's hand caught his arm. "Careful. She is no longer yours to claim. She belongs to the darkness now." But Aaron barely heard him. His gaze was locked on hers. The bargain. The Shadow Lord himself did not appear in form, but in voice, carried on the chill wind that swept through the chamber. It was deep, ancient, and merciless. "Choose, chosen. Strike her down, and the war ends. Refuse, and the shadows will consume all that breathes." The priests knelt, trembling. Soldiers outside tightened their grips on their weapons, though none dared speak. All eyes turned to Aaron. He felt the weight of every life pressing against his shoulders. Villages, children, comrades, all depended on the choice now placed in his hands. But his heart screamed against it. This was Leora, not an enemy, not a shadow beast. His friend, his sister in all but blood. Leora's lips trembled. She looked at him as though torn in two. "Aaron, I don't want this, but I can't fight him. The darkness, it lives inside me now. If you don't stop me, it will never stop." Her voice broke. Tears glistened in her eyes, cutting through the corruption like tiny shards of light. Aaron's throat burned. "No, no, there has to be another way. I can save you. I've healed wounds no one thought could be healed. I'll free you, Leora. I swear it." But her smile was the saddest thing he had ever seen. "You can't heal what I've become. Don't let the world die because of me." The battle. The Shadow Lord would not wait. The shadows surged through the walls, filling the chamber with writhing blackness. The priests scattered in fear. The soldiers raised their blades, but they knew they could not stand against what entered. Leora moved like a phantom, her body bending with unnatural grace, shadow-forged blades forming in her hands. She struck at Aaron. not out of malice, but out of compulsion, her movements controlled by the will of her master. Eren met her blade with his own, light sparking against shadow. Their clash sent echoes through the sanctuary. Each strike was heavy, but heavier still was the weight in his heart. "Fight me, Eren," she cried between blows, her voice choked with despair. "If you hold back, he'll use me to kill you, and then all will fall." "I can't," he snarled, his blade trembling against hers. "I won't kill you." The darkness around her flared, twisting her features into something monstrous. Her strikes grew wild, desperate, yet behind every blow he still saw her eyes, pleading, begging, hoping. Eren's light blazed brighter, scorching the shadows back, but for every inch he pushed forward, the Shadow Lord's laughter filled the hall. "You cannot win, Chosen," the voice thundered. "You cannot bear the cost." The choice. Minutes felt like hours. The chamber shook with their battle. Statues crumbled, fires sparked, screams echoed from the hallways as shadows consumed all who lingered too close. Eren's strength was waning. Blood ran down his arm, his breathing ragged. Still he fought, refusing to deliver the final blow. Then Leora faltered. Just for a moment, the darkness flickered, and she collapsed to her knees before him. The shadow-forged blade dissolved from her hand. Her eyes met his, clear for the first time in years. "Eren," her voice was small, human. "Please, end this." His blade shook in his grasp. Tears blurred his vision. His heart screamed against it, every part of him begging for another way. But there was none. To save her was to lose the world. To save the world was to lose her. His hand trembled as he raised the blade of light. "I am sorry, Leora. Forgive me." She smiled through her tears, a smile that carried the memory of starlit nights, of laughter, of friendship unbroken by time. "There's nothing to forgive." And as the shadows surged to reclaim her, Eren whispered her name and struck. The blade pierced through the darkness, searing it with holy fire. Leora cried out, but her voice was not pain, it was release. The shadows burned away, unraveling into smoke. Her body dissolved into light, her corrupted form shattering like glass. For the briefest moment, he saw her as she once was, bright-eyed, laughing alive. And then she was gone. The silence after. The chamber fell silent. The shadows recoiled, screeching in agony, and then vanished. The voice of the Shadow Lord faded into nothingness. The war was over, but victory tasted like ash in Eren's mouth. He stood in the ruins of the hall, his blade falling from his grasp. His knees hit the stone floor. His body shook, not from wounds, but from the unbearable emptiness inside him. He had saved the world. The balance was restored. Songs would be sung of his triumph, and the people would rejoice. But in the depths of his heart, Eren knew the truth. The cost of peace was a single soul, one he had loved and lost twice. And her final smile, tear-stained and fleeting, would haunt him for the rest of his days. The final sacrifice. As dawn broke, light spilled across the shattered sanctuary. Survivors emerged from the shadows, their voices filled with awe. They called him hero, savior, chosen. Eren said nothing. He stood at the threshold of the sanctuary, staring at the horizon where the night retreated before the sun. The world was safe for now, but his heart was not. The greatest sacrifice was not his blood, nor his pain, nor even his loneliness. It was her. It was Leora. And though the world would never know the weight of his choice, Eren would carry it until the end of his days. Years later, the world flourished again. Peace returned, and Eren was remembered not as a hero, but as a legend. Songs carried his name, temples bore his mark. Yet, the greatest reward was not glory. It was the quiet moment when he closed his eyes, hearing Leora's voice one last time. "You did well. Rest now." The chosen never live for themselves. Their reward lies in the lives that bloom after their sacrifice. And Eren finally understood the cost of being chosen.